So I see a lot of people struggling.
Yeah.
Uh, I'll just shift gears into one of your specialties. You work with, forgive me, I don't know the terms of pre prepartum and postpartum folks.
Hmm.
Is that right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
Say,
I guess one word to encapsulate all of it is perinatal.
perinatal. Okay, yeah, there it is.
Yeah.
Gotta, I gotta get my terminology correct if I'm going to host this podcast. Talk about that. What are some unique challenges that pregnant moms and dads who have pregnant moms face, and how do you work with that? What's unique about that particular presentation in session, I guess?
I think some of my unique work is just being able to know how to approach treatment with this population. Um, for example, with especially with moms who are pregnant and or recently had a child, there are certain screening assessments that I administer, usually on a quarterly basis, just to measure the progress in treatment with the moms that I work with.
What are some of those? Because we got some clinicians who listen to this too, and we like to learn.
Absolutely. The Edinburgh postnatal depression scale is one. The PHQ-9 is one, and that can be used either or with the Edinburgh postnatal depression scale. Both of those obviously measure depression and emotional distress. Then there is the GAD-7 that measures anxiety. So those are all free. So you can go to phqscreeners.com and be able to access those. And I know that some electronic medical records are also have those in their system, and you can just use it. Like I think Simple Practice is one that has one as part of their EHR that you can just use as part of a template and send electronically to the moms. So those are some that we use, and then there are some other standardized tests that you can obviously use, especially if you're trained as a psychologist. Those are some other ones that testing that you can use also to do some further assessment as well.
Take us through what the common, I guess, struggle or presentation is that you see with people who are pregnant versus not.
I think it really depends. So some moms I've had come to me and say that they're more irritable. They cry a little bit more often or become upset about things that normally wouldn't upset them. I think one of the most important questions that we ask, especially right after birth, is asking moms how much sleep they get. Sleep is lack of sleep is a predictor of being susceptible to perinatal mood and anxiety disorders. So that's something that we assess for. We also assess for community support. So we're looking at the client support system. What I've often tried to help clients with also is assessing what kind of help can they be offered from members of their support system. So, there's tangible help, like monetary help or someone who can run errands for them. There's other people who can provide emotional support. Do they have professionals who can provide them with informational support about what they're going through? As some examples of me being assessing their support system, because a lot of that is important. I don't really think that a lot of people, or even a lot of moms, don't really understand that until they're in the situation and they're like, wow, I think I really need some help with this. I need help with cleaning up around the house. I really want to be able to get more sleep, or I just need someone to hold the baby for me. Those are a lot of different things that, moms encounter. And if there's not enough of that support, it can cause some of, perinatal mood anxiety disorders. Sometimes if moms have pre-existing mental health issues prior to pregnancy, that makes them susceptible to that during and after pregnancy as well. Hormonal changes impact, mental wellness during and after birth as well. So everyone's situation is different. So I don't really think there's like one approach to take when it comes to clients in this population. You really just have to take it one case at a time.
Did you experience any of that? You have a 4-year-old.
I did. I later learned that I experienced postpartum depression.
Yeah, well, a lot of time is spent on that. Like I guess in the popular media, you talk postpartum depression, then it just like gets truncated to postpartum It's like, well, postpartum what? But you mentioned anxiety too, and I
Yeah,
think
definitely.
it's a really important consideration. What do people worry about when right after having a baby, or even before they have the baby? What are some of the common worries?
Some things to look for, it can be go as far as being agitation, inability to sit still, worrying about the baby, and it can and it, I think they're the type of worries that come up for moms. They make sense, but they can also be irrational, if that makes sense.
For sure.
Um, More like high alert. It's more about excessive concern about the baby's health or mom's own health, constant worry, racing thoughts, shortness of breath, heart palpitations, sleep disturbances are very common anxiety symptoms for this population.
Is this happening more these days with the prevalence of intense scrutiny through social media, the desire to compete, post everything, look, make sure your baby's doing well as compared with other babies and all that stuff? Like, is it different now than it was 30 years ago, you think?
I haven't seen the data on it, to be honest with you, but I can't imagine, especially during COVID, because everyone's been quarantined and been in close quarters for, long periods of time, especially new moms trying to make sure that they're protecting their babies are protected. I can imagine that, a lot of these different things are heavily impacting moms. And I try to encourage moms too, because it's very common, like mom guilt can be very common, and comparing your parenting to another mother's parenting, or your baby's milestones to another baby's milestones, or like, oh, she looks so happy on here. Why can I do that? So I think these are normal struggles. I'm not sure like how much it's changed as far as like data goes, but I know it's had to intensify, because of the pandemic.
Yeah, and I got to believe that. I mean, one of the things that I try to help people understand is there's this chicken or egg thing between anxiety and depression, because they often walk together, and sometimes you get so worked up and worried about whatever it is you're worried about that you then slip into depression thinking you'll never get out of it, right? Especially with academics, children who, is like, I gotta get A's, and then you get a couple of B's and it's like, I'll never get an A. And then all of a sudden it's like depression's walking, but it was preceded by the anxiety. How do you work with that? Like, if somebody's listening, they're like, oh my gosh, you're describing me. What do you do?
In terms of like dealing with,
yeah, you as a clinician, like how do you work in that realm, I suppose? What things do you say? I mean, certainly validation is a big part of it, but are there common tips and techniques?
Definitely. So in terms of like anxiety, I would say I'm going to lean towards anxiety first. That's what we're kind of talking about just here a second ago. I like to ask clients, I like to do this activity called the control circle. And I draw a circle on the page. And on the inside of the circle, I put things I can control. And on the outside of the circle, I put things I can't control. And I ask my clients to write down everything that they can think of that they can control, put on the inside, and everything they can think of that they cannot control, and put on the outside of that circle. And that, what this activity does, just help give them perspective on where they're spending a lot of energy over things that really they're unable to really put a grasp on or control in essence. And what I often get in response to that is I can control my thoughts. I can control myself. So everything that you can control really has to do with you. And everything you can't control has everything to do with everybody else.
You're teaching them to let go is what it sounds like.
Yeah, or where to really focus their energy, because just, a lot of people are in situations that are really difficult to let go. Right. So I think the goal of that is to really help them cope through it, but cope in a healthy way. So when they're in a situation, I'm like, okay, what about this situation do you have control over? What can you do? And what is this your best? If this is the best you can do, then keep doing your best. Whatever you can't control, try to divert your attention to what you can control in this situation.
Do you get
just each day as it comes.
How much yes butting do you get from that? Like, yes, but like, I can't. I must control this thing. It's my mother-in-law who's always pestering me or whatever it is.
I think that's when I kind of sit back and I'll say, okay, what about this situation is really bothering you? What's had you really thinking about it? And I really help my clients try to break it down, because if there's a yes, but there's something to that. and there's a deeper root to something that's really bothering them, or it could be something that's been ongoing for a long period of time. Okay, let's talk about this. Let's break this down. What can you manage about this particular thing? And that's how I kind of tailor my suggestions on how clients should approach their situations from there.
So, like, not necessarily challenging belief systems, but learning to understand where it originates.
Sometimes I think it's a mixture of both. Because with belief systems, sometimes we get caught up in those cognitive distortions. I should have done this. I could have done that. And I'm like, okay, all right. So that did happen, and I'm validating your feelings about what happened during this time. But right now, what do you feel like is important to focus on? And how do you want to move forward from where you are right now?
What do you find the answers are?
Sometimes it helps give the client perspective. Okay, I think I want to further develop my coping skills, or how should I respond when this person approaches me like this and causes me discomfort? Or what boundaries do you feel like are important that you need to establish? What do you need help establishing these boundaries? What can you say yes to? And there's, I always say, can you give a partial yes, where you can do something, but you may not be able to see everything through or fulfill a request from someone else, but you can say, here, this is what I can do. So it's like that partial yes. I'm like, okay. And it's okay to say no. What can you say no to? You don't have to go in this situation, but if you do you want to bring someone with you, or what tools do you need to help you get through this particular situation that you know is going to be difficult for you to face?
Yeah, that's really good. I think boundaries are a big hot topic these days. I see a lot of it on Instagram, and it's one of those, like, we understand it because we're highly trained, but then the general public is like, yeah, boundaries. That sounds like a great idea. If only I could. How, I guess, like, how do we bring people to the point where they go, yes, I'm going to implement this and I'm going to mean it, and I'm not going to be held hostage by any sort of emotional warfare that threatens to make me break it down? What do you do? What's your technique? What's your favorite way of helping somebody to establish a boundary and maintain it?
I would say, how do you want to feel in this situation? I think that's the first thing I start with. How do you want to feel about this particular thing? What do you need to feel the way that you want to feel?
The returning choice to their behavior patterns.
Absolutely. Because with boundaries, you feel indebted or obligated to do things when it comes to that.
Yeah.
So what my goal is to help my clients release that sense of obligation and try to help them feel more obligated to themselves than to other people.
That's tough to do for some people, especially if they've been raised in a way that maybe trained them to be a caretaker for the whole world, something like that.
Yeah.
That's pretty challenging. You find people respond well?
I think it takes time. It's not something that happens right away, because I do get a lot of, but I have to do this, but I need to do that, or I'm afraid to do this. I'm afraid of, and the other side of boundaries, I'm afraid of how the other person is going to respond to me.
Sure.
And so I think once I'm able to help my clients start working through that fear of how someone else is going to respond, and help them become attuned to more what important to them. And sometimes I get a little practice, and when they're being able to be more assertive, and that feels good. Like, okay, I want to feel like that again, so I'm going to keep doing it. It's like that kind of reinforcement for them.
Yeah. Yeah. Let's talk about depression for a little bit, because you mentioned that you struggled with it. What was your experience? How'd you get through it? How do you apply that now?
My experience was definitely challenging. I didn't have a therapist at the time that I was experiencing postpartum depression. I didn't realize I had experienced it until I got more training in perinatal mental health. And I was like, that was me. Mm-hmm. Like, I knew I was depressed, but I didn't realize it was related to, as far as me being during the postpartum period. I was in that 1 year postpartum range. And so I had family and I had friends that were really there that really helped me. I didn't know anyone personally at the time who experienced it. And I had a lot of different dynamics in my personal life going on at the time, which I really think was a cause for a lot of how I was feeling. But I did recognize it, I think, maybe like in the middle of my pregnancy. but I tried not to acknowledge it because I knew it would affect the baby, but I wasn't aware of how at the time, but I knew it would affect my daughter. And so I was like, okay, I'm going to pretend to be happy and I'm going to